Hello and welcome to Cooking the Books with Heather. Today we're going to be making our second recipe from Mr. Jew's in Chinatown, the new cookbook from Brandon Jew and Tianlan Ho. I'm pretty sure I said that right. I don't want to take it out and look, but I'm pretty sure that's right. Now I have been seeing this all over my Instagram feed, and I'd already marked this to make because it was one of the things that I have pretty much all the ingredients, didn't have to go buy anything. But also it's bread, which usually my husband makes, so we'll see. We're gonna be making milk bread. Now, he usually makes it in a Pullman pan, I think is what he calls it. I've never seen one, but it is a loaf pan that makes a long loaf with a lid, so it makes a very square bread. We don't have that, but that's okay. He includes instructions on how to use regular loaf pans, and what we're gonna do is put a baking sheet on top of these and with it buttered to sort of mimic that. So that's what we're going to be doing, and it makes 2 loaves if you do that. So that's what we're gonna be making, and I'm looking forward to this. It sounds delicious. It seems like, he says it's a very moist, it has a lot more hydration in it, the bread, so it lasts longer. It can sort of stand up to waiting a little bit before you eat it. He says you can store it at room temperature for 5 days or in the freezer for 3 months. So that's longer than most breads last. But the reason that it's a high moisture bread is this first thing we're going to be doing. We're going to be making a tangjong. I think I said that right. I looked it up. Anyway, it is kind of like a starter, but we're going to be really hydrating some flour. And to do that, we're going to cook it. So we're going to start with some whole milk. And some water. This seems to be a kind of enriched dough. There's not a lot of eggs. There are eggs though, and also butter that we're putting in the dough. So that seems interesting. And then we have some bread flour. I've measured all of the dry ingredients by weight because they're in there, and that's just easier than measuring cups. So we're supposed to whisk this together, and then we're going to cook it on medium heat. He says until it's bubbly and thickened to a pudding consistency, 4 to 5 minutes. So I'll let you know how long that takes us in just a minute. I'm not going to show you that part because it's pretty boring, but I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. Okay, so for me on my stove, this took about 6 or 7 minutes. I forgot to start timing immediately. So my editor, if he is watching and paying attention, can give you the exact time here. But so now we need this to cool to room temperature. And so this is what I'm calling it. It's pretty, it still looks a little thin, but as it cools, it'll get thicker, and we don't want it to get clumpy. So we're going to have to whisk this every few minutes to make sure it doesn't get lumpy. Now, you do need to whisk this constantly, maybe not immediately, but as soon as it starts getting warm, you'll definitely need to whisk it to keep it from getting lumps. So I'm gonna leave this on my granite countertops and whisk it occasionally while I prepare everything else. So we're gonna be using a mixer for this. I'm not doing this by hand. And so we're going to put everything else, I've measured everything else out. We don't need everything else right this minute, but we're gonna put a bunch of this stuff in our mixing bowl. So this is more bread flour. Again, weighed to measure, not by volume. There we go. So we're putting flour. We have some plain white granulated sugar, also measured by weight. We have, what else? Yeast. It's quite a lot of yeast. He calls for instant dry yeast. There we go. And then some kosher salt. There we go. And we have to whisk this together. Took a little break to whisk my other mixture. All right, so this is all whisked together. It gets it all mixed together nicely and also breaks up any clumps that you have in anything there. All right, so we need this again, but everything else I can put away. And we're just waiting for the tangjong to cool to lukewarm. Not exactly room temperature, but lukewarm. So I'm going to be checking that and whisking it. It shouldn't take all that long. The cold granite countertops really help move the heat away. So I'll be checking that. Okay. Mine is definitely only lukewarm. So I'm going to call that good. It's only been about 6 or 7 minutes, but like I said, the stone countertops really help to cool things down pretty quickly. And we're going to combine this with our bread flour mixture here. You really want it to be lukewarm so you don't kill the yeast that's in here, because if it's too warm, it will do that. So just gonna scrape all this in here. As well as I can. All right. There we go. Put that over there for now. And we're supposed to mix this with the dough hook for about 2 minutes on low speed until moist clumps form. So, okay. I think that's probably good. I'm gonna give it one more little spin now that I've taken things off of the dough hook. That's good. Okay, so now we're adding egg. This is supposed to be at room temperature. I did not plan ahead and take it out of the refrigerator, so I cheated it a little bit and put it in a cup or a bowl of hot tap water. You don't want it too hot, you don't want to cook it, but that helped raise the temperature so it's not refrigerator cold. Feels maybe a little cooler than room temperature, but not by much. So I'm gonna put this in. Try not to get a shell in there. There we go. And mix this together. Now we're going to slowly pour some more whole milk. I'm gonna turn this off. This also is supposed to be at room temperature. Again, I did not plan well, so I measured it out, gave it about 30 seconds in the microwave. So it was a little bit warmer than room temperature then, but now it's pretty much room temperature, so perfect. So we're gonna slowly pour this in to make a very wet dough. About a minute, he says. That's how slow. Okay. So I'm gonna call this okay for this step. It's very wet. There's some extra wetness on the sides. Hopefully that'll all get mixed in as we incorporate our last ingredient. In fact, let me go ahead and sort of wipe down the sides a little bit just to, okay. Now we're going to increase the speed to medium and add our butter. Also room temperature butter. Again, I had to heat this up in the microwave a little bit. It has a softened butter setting, which does not melt it, thankfully. I don't use it all that often because I'm usually pretty good at remembering the butter, but not the eggs or the milk. So we're going to add this one piece at a time. These are roughly 1 tablespoon pieces. And at medium speed and wait until each one incorporates before we add the next. So this one piece doesn't want to get incorporated, so I'm just going to break it up a little bit more. This is a very wet dough, very wet, very sticky. Let's put it on while it's off. Okay, that was supposed to take about 5 minutes, and we're supposed to continue mixing until a smooth, sticky dough forms that clears the sides of the bowl about 10 minutes more. So 10 more minutes approximately. Here we go. Okay, it's been about 10 minutes, and definitely within the last couple minutes, the dough started coming together to be sort of one big ball, which is what I was hoping to see, and not sticking to the sides so much. It's still a very sticky dough, but what we need to do now is get as much of the dough off into one ball at the bottom of the bowl as we can. So he says to scrape down the sides, and so now we're just going to leave that as is. Phew. Okay, that was tough. All right, so we're going to cover this with a clean kitchen towel and let it rise until it has doubled, he says, about 45 minutes. So we'll keep track of about how long that takes us, and we'll be back in about 45 minutes. My milk bread was rising for 45 minutes. I set a timer, and that's exactly what this is. It looks doubled to me, so we're gonna go with it. I've done some preparation in the meantime. I have buttered the inside of my 2 loaf tins, and I have also buttered the bottom of a baking sheet. Also gave it a quick wash just to make sure it was really clean, because I don't know how well my helpers take care of the bottom of our baking sheets. So, and I have started my oven heating to 375 degrees. You want to have the racks in the lower third and nothing above it. So if you have other racks above it, you're gonna have to take those out or find another place for those. I'm able to fit all of my racks below that, so we're good there. So now I'm going to, oh, and I'm making 2 loaves, and he says to pat them out into 2 10 by 10 squares. Instead of that, I'm gonna do 1 10 by 20 square, and so I've made some tape marks on my counter. This is 10 inches, this is 20 inches, so I'm gonna make 1 10 by 20, cut it in half, and then roll it up to make the loaves. So I'm gonna do a little bit differently there, but it shouldn't make any difference really. So first I'm going to lightly flour this surface that we are going to use. Hopefully won't need any more of this, but we'll see. It's a very sticky dough. So he says to punch it down, and it's very sticky, and then transfer it to our lightly floured surface. I'm gonna try to get as much as I can out of here because, you know, why not? So now the plan is to pull and stretch, right? He says, using floured hands, pat and stretch the dough into the size and shape that we want. So I'm just trying to make sure that it's not going to stick. And it should end up being about 1/2 inch thick once we get it the right size. So oops, I'm getting flour all over the place, but that's nothing new for me. So I'm going for the inside between here and here for our 20 inches. The goal is to, I should have marked this 10 inches. So I think we're about right there. So I'm going to just cut this here and then roll the dough tightly, then pinch the seam ends closed. So I'm gonna start with this cut side and try to roll it as tightly as I can. All right, pinch the seams closed, pinch the ends closed. And then put it seam side down into the pan. My pan here. I'm just going to seam side down. Here we go. And do the other one. Now, I'm going to put this, I've got another baking pan just to go underneath it so that I can put them together very easily. And I have my towel here. This one looks much nicer than this one, but we will see how they turn out. And I'm going to cover these with a towel, and I'm going to put them in a warm place, as warm as I can get in my house without going into the proofing drawer. For about 15 minutes. They should proof to about 1/2 inch from the top of the pan. So we'll see if that happens. We'll see you in 15 minutes. So this has been about 15 minutes and I don't know. I feel like it has a ways to go yet. Like we have about 1 inch to the top, not 1/2 inch. So I'm going to let it go for a little bit longer. He says that if you overproof it, punch it down and redo it. I'm going to let it go, I don't know, 5 more minutes or so and see if they look better. Okay, so I gave my bread about another 15 minutes and I think they look more risen now. I look a little bit better, so I'm gonna call this done. So at this point, it was about 30 minutes instead of 15. It depends on your temperature and all that in your house. Now we're going to lightly brush these with some more whole milk. I think that's good enough. I'm gonna put these in the oven. I'm gonna put my buttered baking tray on top, and then I'm gonna put my heavy cast iron 12-inch fry pan on it. Any heavy oven-proof pan will do. We're gonna bake them like that for 30 minutes, and then we take the pan off and let them finish without anything on top. So we take the cast iron dish and the cast iron frying pan and the baking sheet off and let them finish like that. He says about another 15 minutes, but until it's golden brown, and you can take the temperature, and it should be about 200 degrees in the center. So I will probably do that just to make sure we're good. But that's it for this part, and we will show you what they look like when they come out, and let you know what we think in just a minute. On this episode of Cooking the Books with Heather, you watched me make milk bread from Mr. Ju's in Chinatown by Brandon Ju and Tianlan Ho. And I have never had milk bread before, and I did not have the sort of specific pan that he calls for that makes it very square. And I feel like I probably would have preferred not putting a lid on it and just making it a rounded loaf, because mine didn't end up completely filling the pan and making it kind of square. It would have been a little bit, what's that called? Trapezoidal? but because, you know, a normal bread loaf pan is not straight up, it kind of goes out. Anyway, mine didn't end up completely filling it, and the center, the top kind of fell some, which may have been because I overproofed it. I did proof it longer than he said because it was not as there was a timing, and then there was until it's a certain amount from the top, and it took a little bit longer for mine to rise that high. So maybe it was overproofed. Maybe my pan was just a little bit bigger than the amount could fill, and so it ended up collapsing. I don't know exactly, but if I make this again, I will probably just make it like a regular loaf with a rounded top. I've seen those. I'm sure it'll be absolutely fine. It also might have fallen because he does have you take it out of the pan immediately, and so that means, and I had a little problem. I guess I didn't butter my pans well enough. So I kind of felt like I was shaking it a lot, and I feel like when it was still really hot, and I feel like that helped make it collapse. But all that said, the bread was really delicious. We loved it. We had it the first day. We tried it as toast. We tried it as French toast, and it does make incredible French toast, like he says. It's not dense, it's light, but it's also kind of sturdy enough to soak up some egg and not completely dissolve. It was a really delicious bread, and I would certainly make this again. And honestly, there's not even a lot of proofing time in this. I don't know if that's because it has a decent amount of sugar in it to feed the yeast so it doesn't take as long to proof. I don't know. I'm not the bread person in my family, but it's delicious. In fact, I might make my husband make it next time, see if he does better. But it was fine the way I made it. Once it's out on the rack, cooled completely, cut it, and it slices really well. You wrap it, after it's cooled completely, you can wrap it in plastic wrap because you're not worried about a crusty exterior on this bread. It's not really supposed to be crusty. So unlike, like a French bread. So, and it does last pretty long. I think he says, at room temperature for up to 5 days. And I think we went we made some French toast on maybe the 4th day after we made it. And it was still pretty soft, and it did last a pretty long time. So, I'm really glad I decided to make this. I'm really glad that I was seeing it all over my Instagram feed and decided to make it. Ooh, I do think it would make really good rolls, which is another method that he has in here, another way to, shape them and bake them as rolls. I would definitely do that with these. I think they would be great. So if I try it, I'll let you know how it goes. But if you enjoyed watching me make this, please give me a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and come back and watch me make something else next week.